So welcome back. This is GCSE Poetry. This is Lesson 3 on William Wordsworth. My name's Dr. Jane. I'm doing this for my Langdon Park School students. We're going to do what we've done in the previous videos, which is try to approach and respond to an unseen poem. So we're going to read these poems as if we've never seen them before, and we're going to just try to experience them and try to respond to them in personal response and in a creative response. And this unit is about creative writing and creative responses. And after we've done all that, we'll go into context and then literary and comparative analysis. Okay, so the first thing we do is let's have a starter. Let's look at this. Nature is proof of God's power. Being in nature is as close to being near God than anything in a city. In cities, we have sin. In nature, there is only God. To what extent do you agree or disagree with these statements? What image better reflects the statements above, and why? Another stretch you might think about is, how does someone like Blake fit into this narrative? So what I'd want you to do now is press pause, and if you're with someone, you could talk to them. If not, you can write down your answers in your books. Okay, so pause. Okay, so these are your first thoughts. We're going to think about nature. What's the power of nature? And nature is something that's really important to Wordsworth. And before this idea of nature's power is something that's going to emerge in all these poems. Before we move on, there is actually another poem for homework, which is on page 9, which is Shelley's poem addressed to Wordsworth, poet of nature. You already can get a sense of what his opinion might be. I'd like you to take a look and read that poem on your own. It's another one of his sonnets. And from that poem, and if you'd like, you could do your own research. What is his opinion about Wordsworth? And how did Wordsworth's reputation change over time? Because it did change a lot over time, and hopefully you can get something of that from that poem to Wordsworth. Okay, so let's move on with today. Only nature can showcase God's beauty and power. To what extent do you agree or disagree? So on the left we have the mountains and the sky. These are black and white. I think these are Ansel Adams photographs. I think those are the ones I appealed to. He's just a beautiful photographer, American photographer of nature, black and white photography, but still captures the immensity, the gargantuanness of nature, and the beauty of it. But I don't know, but for me, I'm a city person, and that's an aerial photograph of London at night, when it was active and full of lights, and I think there's a beauty there too. I find it's difficult for me to accept that only nature can showcase God's beauty. For me, I think that the city has its own thing. I don't know if that was true for Blake, and for Wordsworth, it's complicated because people think that he only liked nature. He didn't just like nature, actually. He worshipped it almost to the extent that he could see something there. And this is all I really want you to know about him. He was a real innovator in poetry, in English poetry particularly. What he did was he brought common speech to poetry, the actual language of people talking. He took out regular rhyme. He wasn't as interested in that as, say, Blake, or even Shelley. I would say he was a lot less interested in that, and he had these enjambed lines to demonstrate a kind of what he calls elsewhere an overflow of emotion. But I want to show you some poems that he's also wrote, because he also wrote sonnets as well, like Shelley, and actually he also didn't just worship the beauty of nature. He also saw beauty in the city as well. So I think it's really important to look at the stereotypes of a poet, like the kind of received ideas we have of them, and a more complicated vision of them as well. Okay, so this is from a poem of his called Composed Upon Westminster Bridge, September 3rd, 1802. What I'd like you to do is just press pause when I say, and to just look at those words, and from them, to predict how is he going to find this poet of nature, how's he going to find the city beautiful? And from the words on the left, can you predict what imagery kind of will really get his imagination going? So if you could pause. Okay, so hopefully you've written down your predictions, and now let's try and take a closer look. I'm going to read this poem with these two photographs there in mind. I'm going to read it once, then I'm going to just annotate it. I'm going to read it. I'm going to give you some structural ideas, and then I'm just going to read it fresh. Composed upon Westminster Bridge, September 3rd, 1802. Earth has not anything to show more fair. Dull would he be of soul who could pass by a sight so touching in its majesty. The city now doth, like a garment, wear the beauty of the morning, silent, bare, ships, towers, domes, theaters, and temples lie open unto the fields and to the sky, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Never did sun more beautifully steep in his first splendor, valley, rock, or hill. Ne'er saw I, ne'er felt a calm so deep. The river glideth at his own sweet will. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all that mighty heart is lying still. That's really quite powerful. You really see that the poet loves nature, but actually he's never felt a calm like this when other than being in a city. Now, remember with a sonnet, there are different ways of dividing it. But one way of thinking about it is the first 8 lines form an octave, and the last 6 lines are a sextet, which is there are 2 main arguments to the poem, and they go to those full stops. But what you could also notice is the colon in after line 3. What follows is an augmentation of this idea of majesty. And here in the last 3 lines, we get another kind of end or argument. If you want, you could look at the, we're not going to talk about looking at poetic rhyme schemes, because that isn't what you do when you read a poem. What you do is you read it out loud and you respond to it, and you think about, what does this poem make you think? How does it make you feel? And you practice marking it up. And, I have a lot of practice doing this, but you should also do this with me so that you can start to feel more bold and more strong about what it is that you're doing when you're reading. Earth has not anything to show more fair. Beautiful. But it's almost human. Fair makes me think of a woman. Dull would he be of soul who could pass by a sight so touching in its majesty. So if you were someone who just liked nature and you couldn't notice that this is beautiful, and majesty is almost like this is royal, beautiful, and emotional. If you couldn't see that, there's something wrong with you. You're boring. You're dull. The city now doth like a garment wear the beauty of the morning. So the city is wearing the morning like it's clothing. And this creates an atmosphere that's silent, strangely bare, empty maybe, because bare makes me think it's in conflict with wearing clothing. Ships, towers, domes, theaters, and temples lie open unto the fields and to the sky. They're just, everything is open, reaching up, maybe almost in a feeling of almost worship. All bright and glittering in the smokeless air. Smokeless is important because it's inactive. There's no pollution. The city's really asleep. Never did sun more beautifully steep in his first splendor. Valley, rock, or hill, ne'er saw I, never felt a calm so deep. Now this is really important. So even in nature, he never felt this. And I wonder why that is. I wonder if that's because it's a contrast. Or I wonder if that's because something special's here. Because the river glideth at his own sweet will. Dear God, the very houses seem asleep, and all that mighty heart is lying still. Nature, or London is a sleeping giant, almost, with a hidden heart, a soul, something alive. Nature itself could be alive. And this is a moment, I think, a snapshot for Wordsworth of being alive in the world, of something beautiful and something just calming and really unusual, because it's the city and it's not nature, and it's not what you'd expect from this poet of nature. So that's one example of one of his sonnets where he's worshiping the city itself as having this beauty. And I guess what we see in Wordsworth in this poem is the idea of something beyond what can be seen, something magical, mystical, a power, maybe religion we could think about. Could you just take a moment and pause and maybe reread the poem? Because obviously I did it really quickly. How does Wordsworth show the power of the city to inspire him? How does Wordsworth merge his love of nature and his love for the city? And if you could just respond sorry, that's my phone, I have to put it on silent. If you could just respond to that in your own way for about 5 minutes, okay? I'm just going to pause. No, you should pause. I'm going to continue in just a second. Okay, so hopefully you've read the poem a few times, and now you can have a personal response. You have some kind of line or an image that strikes you, something there that you've been able to annotate and been able to do something with. Those are my annotations, of course. And now let's take a look at another one of his poems. This is called The World is Too Much With Us, another one of his sonnets. So Wordsworth is sad that this technological society we have can't find power in nature anymore. And he'd rather be a pagan and worship the god in nature. So pagan, someone prior to religion, and it's a different religion. It's the religion of worshiping the spirits in nature itself, as opposed to a creator in the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition of a god who's created things. But actually, he'd much rather worship nature itself. And what I want you to think about when I read this poem is, how does he use language to celebrate the power of nature? And again, I have another one of Ansel Adams' amazing photographs capturing this moment in nature where the waterfall with its power is just churning. The world is too much with us. The world is too much with us. Late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. This sea that bears her bosom to the moon, the winds that will be howling at all hours, and are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For this, for everything, we are out of tune. It moves us not. Great God, I'd rather be a pagan suckled in a creed outworn. So might I, standing on this pleasant lea, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn, have sight of Proteus rising from the sea, or hear old Triton blow his wreathed horn. The poem ends with these images from mythology to really emphasize, I think, the power in nature. So let's take a look at this poem up close and see what we can do with it. The world is too much with us. Okay, what does that mean? I don't know. It's a negative thing, I think. Late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. So we're obsessed with time. We're obsessed with money. And what it's doing is it's wasting. We are forgetting what is important in the world. Little we see in nature that is ours. We see ourselves as separate from nature, strangely. separate. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. This is a horrible thing to do. The sea that bears her bosom to the moon, the winds that will be howling at all hours, and are upgathered now like seeping flowers. What a series of images of nature. We don't even, we don't see what the poet sees, because we've given this all away. The sea is a woman laying her back and showing herself to the sky and the moon. The winds howling all the hours. That might be a bit cliche, that one, but still we get the idea. Upgathered now like sleeping flowers. That might be more exciting and brand new. Are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. So when the wind is blowing, it's howling, and when it's all calm, that's a really amazing image of calm wind, like a series of flowers. That's what I see anyway. I wonder if it's here, the break. I feel like there is a break here. For this, for everything, we are out of tune. We don't get it. So our instruments don't receive. And our instruments are us. We're not moved as we should be. We should be moved emotionally. We should be moved emotionally. I'd rather be a pagan suckled in a creed outworn. That's a great line. Suckled, fed on a creed, on beliefs that are worn out. I'd rather be a pagan from old times and fed on something from the past. So then, were I to be standing here, and I'd have sights, glimpses that would make me less sad, maybe less disoriented or separated. I would have. Proteus is the Greek god who continued to change form. Having sight of Proteus rising from the sea, or hear old Triton blow his wreathed horn. So you'd see, if you believed in these old natural religions, what would happen is you could see these gods. Imagine them present all around us. And what you'd notice is we're so boring, we're so attached to the things around us that, in fact, if we could actually see the power in nature, we could see something that would really shock and amaze us. And he uses these gods at the end of the poem to really emphasize this. So that's me reading the poem a few times. Here are a few lines that I think are really stick out to me anyway. What I would like you to do is just take a moment and to think about, how does Wordsworth celebrate the power of nature? And I don't want you writing an essay necessarily, but what I'd like you to do is practice language analysis. Can you take these lines out of the poem, and can you spend some time analyzing the language, the meaning, the form, as in the poetic form, the aspects of sound and imagery that he's using, and you could think about the structure. You can think about the idea of the sonnet, and you could think about the effect of the language and the devices on the reader. If you want to just practice with these quotes, that's a good way to think about language analysis, which is something we all need to really work on. So you could pause now and take a few minutes to just practice what it would mean to analyze this language. Okay, so we've read 2 of Wordsworth's sonnets. You've read through them on your own. You've read through them with me. You spent some time looking at the language. What I want you to reflect on now is, what are common terms or themes between the 3 poets we've read so far, Shelley, Blake, and Wordsworth? Who's the most political in your opinion? Who's the least political? Who loves nature the most and why? who's the most afraid of nature and why? These are your opinions. These are things you could think about when revising or thinking about these poets. Okay, so now I want us to go to the poem that we need to learn, which is his extract from the Prelude. And to begin, I want you to think about, if you were sitting with someone, you can talk. If not, if you should pause, read through these questions, and write something down. Have you ever felt the thrill of doing something wrong? Was it a big thing or a small thing? Did you ever have the thrill transform into fear? Maybe it was the fear of getting caught, or maybe it was the fear of something else, something dangerous. So if I think about myself, well, what I would like you to do, having reflected on that, is to write down a memory of when you did something you weren't supposed to. And can you remember the fear mixed with the thrill? So I have an example I've given right there. I'd like you to press pause and write down a memory you have of something you're doing you shouldn't be doing, and how it kind of goes the wrong way. Okay, so this memory you're having is something of what happens to Wordsworth in this poem. So again, to get you in the mindset of what he's experiencing in nature, I want you to look at these two images and just talk about and describe which one shows the power of nature more, which one frightens us, can something be both beautiful and frightening. So for me, the one on the left is serene and peaceful, but also has something that is frightening to me anyway, which is the water and something that could emerge from below the water. That could be saying more about me. But just in that atmosphere, I see the stillness, complete peace and calm. And the mountaintop, on the other hand, is quite awe-inspiring. That's quite powerful and unforgiving and maybe brutal. It's iciness, it's snowiness, it's danger. There's something there that is a little bit more frightening to me, though I can appreciate it from a distance. And definitely, for me, that one could definitely be beautiful and frightening. This is a longer poem, and reading it can be daunting. And what I don't want you to do is find that too intimidating. What I would definitely recommend you do is just read the poem, read it out loud, best. I'm going to be reading it out loud to you. Then the next time you read it, I want you to think about annotating your first responses. I want you to think about the structural shifts. I can give those to you. Structural shift, you can think also of the word volta, which means turn in Italian, which is where there's a shift in mood. It's just another way poets refer and critics refer to that shift. And another set of annotations the last time you read it for language. Okay, so before I read it, I'm just going to give you a leg up by kind of telling you what the poem's about. If you look at that image in the top right, what happens in this poem is that Wordsworth essentially runs down. He's really excited. He steals a boat and he goes for a joyride, kind of. And as he pulls out away from the shore, he looks up and he sees this peak, and from this peak, he almost imagines he's being watched, and he feels chased by something in nature, and he's freaked out. So he pulls back to the shore, and then at the end of the poem, he talks about this aftermath. So I'm already going to give you this kind of structural leg up to help you. I'm on page 16. This is a very well-established poem. You can get it anywhere. It's from a bigger project of his called the Preludes. It's a particularly popular passage from it, and we're going to just read through it first, and we're just going to notice. In fact, on my first reading, I'll try and break down where I think the breaks are. Here, let me lift this up a little bit. Okay. One summer evening, led by her, I found a little boat tied to a willow tree, within a rocky cove, its usual home. Straight, I unloosed her chain, and stepping in, pushed from the shore. It was an act of stealth and troubled pleasure, nor without the voice of mountain echoes did my boat move on, leaving behind her still, on either side, small circles glittering idly in the moon, until they melted all into one track of sparkling light. But now, like one who rose, proud of his skill, To reach a chosen point with an unswerving line, I fixed my view upon the summit of a craggy ridge, the horizon's utmost boundary. Far above was nothing but the stars and the grey sky. She was an elfin pinnace. Lustily I dipped my oars into the silent lake, and as I rose upon the stroke, the boat went heaving through the water like a swan. When, from behind a craggy steep, till then the horizon's bound, a huge peak, black and huge, as with its voluntary power instinct, upreared its head. Ooh, something's happened. Let me just see where it goes. When. So that's where I would put the first break. So something upreared its head. It's a very quite frightening image. I struck and struck again, and growing still in stature, the grim shape towered up between me and the stars, and still, for so it seemed, with purpose of its own and measured motion like a living thing, strode after me. With trembling oars I turned, and through the silent water stole my way back to the covert of the willow tree. There in the mooring place I left my bark, and through the meadows homeward went, in grave and serious mood. But after I had seen that spectacle for many days, my brain worked with a dim and undetermined sense. Oh, hold on. This is the aftermath. After I'd seen that spectacle for many days, my brain worked with a dim and undetermined sense of unknown modes of being. That's an amazing line. O'er my thoughts there hung a darkness, call it solitude or blank desertion. No familiar shapes remained, no pleasant images of trees, of sea, or sky, no colors of green fields, but huge and mighty forms that do not live like living men, move slowly through the mind by day, and were a trouble to my dreams. So let's just return to what the structure of this poem. So in the first part of the poem, he steals the boat and he begins the journey. You see all his excitement. He starts to feel chased, and then he gets this aftermath. So let's try looking a little bit closer at the poem. Oh goodness, guys, could you be quiet, please? Okay. One summer evening, led by her, I don't know who she is. Who is this? Who? I found a little boat tied to a willow tree within a rocky cove, its usual home. Oh, I should mention, do you see it's conversational? And it's in jammed lines, like a memory, flowing. And the language is really regular. It's not highly poetic. But it still is, because the boat is a woman. I unloosed her chain, and it was act of stealth, which is something sneaky and hidden. And he uses this troubled pleasure. What an interesting tension between these two terms, because he knows he shouldn't be feeling this. He knows he shouldn't be doing this. And he moves, and he leaves her, and with these beautiful images. In my opinion, they're quite beautiful. Look, small circles. This isn't a sonnet, which is small and compact and tightly argued, and with this intricate rhyme scheme. He's giving himself more space, and he's allowing the memories to flow one after the other. And these small circles melted into one track of sparkling light. That's just an image of light and this magical nighttime. But now, like one who rose proud of his skill to reach a chosen point with an unswerving line, I fix my view upon the summit of a craggy ridge, the horizon's utmost boundary. So, he's using, I think that almost looks to me like an extended, almost an epic simile, which is something you can look up. Not that it matters, but the simile is what you should know. He's he's really proud of what he's doing, and he's trying to get somewhere. He's trying to get to a target, isn't he? And he's fixing his vision. He's very focused on what he wants to do. And there's nothing in this world except freedom, stars for me, freedom and beauty. That's what he's feeling. That excitement of being young, of doing something you shouldn't be doing. This is a word for boat. An elfin is small, so it's a small boat. Then he uses some strange sexual language. Lustily, I dip my oars into the silent lake. Lustily, almost with sexual connotations. And that just makes these strange, dipping my oars also, for me, then, when I put that next to lustily, is he talking about rowing his boat, or is this actually a kind of, is there something sexual actually going on? So this woman, the feminization of the boat, or this troubled pleasure he's taking, becomes somewhat sexualized. And that actually makes the poem something a little bit different. And he's heaving like a swan. Like he's really pulling himself through. But okay, so you get this energy. You get a real, I would say, joy and excitement. Okay, of doing something you shouldn't be doing. But then something happens. Something horrific. A huge peak, black and huge. I mean, that's a really interesting repetition, because it seems redundant, or it emphasizes his fear of something quite large. And it had voluntary, meaning its own power, sticks out to me. And upreared is amazing, because what I see is a lizard or a dragon or some force just rising up. That image is quite powerful for me. And he's terrified, so he's going, but it's growing with him, and it's a monster. It's monstrous, and it towers over him, and it had a purpose of its own. It's alive, it's brutal, it's chasing him. And it's not alive, but it was like a living thing. And it towered, purpose, strode, like almost like chasing him down. And now he's not, lusty oars. It's trembling. He's afraid. He's really afraid. And it's silent, which is even more, I think, horror movie for me. There's nobody there. And he stole his way. And where did he go? To the covert of the willow tree. To the covert. What a great word. You should look it up. To the covert. Well, covert, hidden. I mean, this is a noun here, so I don't know, but I imagine it's the kind of hiding place. And he left his bark, or the boat. And he was in a grave and serious mood, but grave sticks out. A death, serious, but also deadly. What is it? Well, let's look at the aftermath. So his brain worked a dim and undetermined sense of unknown modes of being. There are things in nature that are unknown forces. He comes to understand. And they're not good. It's not beautiful. It's not what he saw in the others, which is a beautiful calm, or something wondrous in London being asleep, or the fantastical powers in nature. No, this is something dangerous and worrisome. And he calls it something like being alone, or blank desertion, being emptied out. Something like being emptied out, which is quite terrifying if you think about it. No familiar shapes remain, no pleasant images of trees, of sea, of sky, no color of green tree fields. Sorry. Oops, let me just focus that. Nothing No stereotypes of easy nature. No, instead, it's something it's huge and mighty forms that do not live like living men, move slowly through my... Yes. Okay, go get it. Oh my goodness. This Wordsworth video needs to be punctuated by them so that you maintain your interest. Do not live like living men, move slowly through the mind by day, and were troubled in my dreams. So they're not alive, not human. It's not human. It's something different. It's something horrific. Okay? Oh gosh, this is hilarious. I'm just going to bring this video to a close. Okay, so I'm going to bring this video to a close. If you're doing the language analysis, what you should be doing is looking at these key words and key moments. Again, think about this. You should watch the next video I have, which is a closer reading of the poem. You should read the poem on your own and acknowledge these 3 sections of the poem, and you're going to start to understand that poems have structures. These are the key moments or quotations. Again, if you're keeping a quotation bank, if you're practicing your language analysis, this is something I would invite you to really do, is really go into these words, look them up in a dictionary, respond to them. What do they mean to you? What do they suggest to you? And what I'd like you to do is have a journal. I'd like you to take some time, 5 to 10 minutes, and do your journal writing and have a personal response, ideas and themes brought up, evidence, quotes, actual language in the poem that you're interested in. And I'd like you to go back, and if you really want to understand what's going on with Wordsworth, is a piece of creative writing, the thrill of stealing, the guilt and fear and the displacement of that fear into something in your psyche. Go back to that memory you had when you did something you weren't supposed to, and think about turning that memory and really sitting on that moment where the fear is mixed in with the thrill. I've given you some of the key lines of Wordsworth that I'd like you to think about, that you could employ in your own creative writing. Again, for each of these poems, we want you to really engage in some form of creative writing to enter into the imaginative space of the poem. And that will allow you to really understand the poem more deeply, and so that when we come back to analysis, you'll have a deeper understanding. So what we've done is we've read a bunch of Wordsworth's poems. We've shown that he isn't only loving nature, that in fact he likes city as well. We notice he has those overflown, jammed lines, but he also has very formal sonnets with rhyme schemes. So a lot of the ideas you may have about Wordsworth might be wrong, or maybe you have no ideas about Wordsworth. Some of the ideas of Wordsworth out there are made more complicated if you read his poems, and I really recommend you do. You should look at Shelley's poem on Wordsworth to see how his reputation changed and what Wordsworth represented to the younger poets. What styles and techniques now could you say do you associate with Wordsworth? And what are the poems that kind of go against that style, the accepted style? And can you look at any more of his poems? You can always, and I'll make a link here, to look at his other, the annotation video I have for the Prelude. But there's nothing better than you reading more of his poems for yourself, doing the exercises and responding. I hope this video is helpful. I hope that you're studying at home, and I hope you're making some way in using these videos to inform your learning about these poets. I'll see you soon.